So hello everyone, welcome to the Collaborative Science for Estuaries webinar series. This is Nick Silberall with the Science Collaborative, and we're glad you can join us for today's webinar, which is a Collaborative Graduate Fellowship to address coastal challenges. And we're very pleased and very excited to be co-hosting this alongside the Margaret A. Davidson Fellowship program. So we've got some great people you'll hear from today. And I'll say more about the programs in a little bit, but first we're just going to take a quick look at today's agenda just to give you an idea of how time is split up. So first up, we'll just have a few housekeeping items from me, and then I'm going to get out of the way and let Chris moderate the session, as he, I'm sure, is very excited to do. We'll do some quick introduction to our panelists, and each one will have a few minutes to give some opening remarks, and then we'll jump right into the discussion and go the rest of the time for about 15 minutes. The rest of the time will be spent on Q&A. So that's just kind of how it'll outline it, like the overall outline. I'll let Chris say more about it when he is up as well. But if you have any questions, please feel free to type them into the questions feature on the GoToWebinar console. Everyone is muted upon entry, and we'll be handling questions this way. So we'll have time for Q&A during the Q&A section, but if you have a question, you don't want to forget it, just feel free to type it into the questions field and it will be saved in there. A quick snapshot of the demographics for today's webinar. This is the registration as of yesterday at around noon, and it's probably not surprising to see a huge number of people from academic institutions. Also awesome to see lots of other sectors represented as well. What's also interesting to me about this is there's a lot of regional representation from all across the country, and that I think just speaks to both the value and impact of this program. So I don't have to talk about the importance of the program. You already know it's important, but it's good to always get together and talk about these things. So before I begin, I'll just give a quick bit of background about the Science Collaborative. So the Science Collaborative and the Reserve System, I should say. The National Estuarine Research Reserve System is a national network of 29 reserves, you can see on this map. And each one of these works in collaboration with a local place-based partner. And each reserve site includes the programs that are listed on the slide there: land stewardship, research and monitoring, training programs, education. And the Science Collaborative supports science for estuarine and coastal decision makers by coordinating regular funding opportunities and supporting user-driven collaborative research, assessment, and transfer activities that address critical coastal management needs identified by the reserves. And I am going to introduce our moderator for the session, who can say more about the Margaret A. Davidson Fellowship Program. So Chris Katalinas is employed by Linker as a grant specialist at the NOAA Office for Coastal Management. In addition to supporting the office's grant programs, Chris delivers training opportunities on project design and evaluation, provides meeting facilitation services, and helps coordinate the Margaret A. Davidson Fellowship Program. And with that, I will pass it over to Chris.
Great. Thank you for that introduction, Nick. And thank you all for joining us today. My personal pronouns are he, him, and I invite the panelists to share their personal pronouns if they desire when they introduce themselves as well. I am very excited and honored to moderate this discussion among three wonderful representatives of the first group of Davidson Fellows. I will let them introduce themselves in a minute, but first would like to provide a brief snapshot of the Margaret A. Davidson Graduate Fellowship for those who may be hearing about it for the first time. This fellowship honors the legacy of Margaret Adelia Davidson, a NOAA coastal leader who saw the future with clarity, knew how to push for innovation, and was well known for really shaking things up. This approach is what NOAA and the research reserves are striving to achieve with the Margaret A. Davidson Graduate Fellowship Program. There are four major elements of the program that fellows can benefit from for their career development. The first being the ability to develop meaningful cross-discipline research projects in conjunction with scientists, community leaders, and other organizations. For example, the first formal training that fellows receive is on how to do collaborative research. There are many networking opportunities within each fellowship class of 29 and with professionals across the reserve system, NOAA, and community partners, as well as direct mentoring with reserve staff. Most fellows have a monthly call with their reserve mentor in addition to the guidance that they receive from their university advisor. There are many professional development training opportunities in a variety of disciplines, including public speaking and project planning. Some of these professional development trainings are required, but most of them are optional throughout the course of the fellowship. The fellowship planning team tries to share any and all relevant opportunities with current fellows to take advantage as their time and interest permits. And finally, the development of research partnerships between universities and reserves is another major element of the program. And this most often occurs in the form of faculty advisors working with reserve staff throughout the fellows project. The overall goal of the fellowship is to develop highly trained, diverse, and successful future leaders in coastal management and research. We hope that after today's webinar, everyone will gain a better understanding of the Davidson Fellowship and help spread the word to potential applicants and partners. Additionally, we hope that potential applicants are intrigued after hearing about current fellow experiences and gain a better understanding of how to get involved. So as Nick mentioned, the general flow for this webinar today, in just a moment, we'll introduce the panelists, and then we have a few planned prompts for you all. So they'll walk through some responses to those prompts, and then there'll be time for questions from the audience. As Nick mentioned, we encourage you all to submit your questions throughout the duration of the webinar. There's no need to wait until the end if something comes to mind. So with that, I am going to introduce our panelists. And I'm going to ask them to come onto the camera, say their name, university, and the reserve that they're at, and just a couple sentences about their project that they would like you all to know. I'm going to start with Jessica.
Hello, I'm very excited to join everyone today and to talk about this wonderful opportunity that I hope many of you will consider. I am Jessica Brunacini. My pronouns are she, her. I'm a PhD candidate at Michigan State University, where I'm working with Dr. Lissy Guerron. And I'm also the Davidson Fellow at the Wells Reserve in Maine, where my mentor is Dr. Christine Fort. My research explores how coastal communities think about and plan for sea level rise. So part one of my Davidson Fellowship project is using the participatory method of photo voice to explore people's connection to place and how it shapes their thinking and planning for the future. And part two involves designing, facilitating, and evaluating a deliberative dialogue process to engage the public in collaborative learning and assessment of coastal resilience and adaptation strategies, including managed retreat.
Great, thank you, Jessica. And now Edgar.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone, or morning for those of you in the West Coast. My name is Edgar from Orejuela. Personal pronouns is he, him. I am a PhD candidate at the University of South Florida and a Margaret A. Davidson Graduate Fellow at the Katalinas Bay National Estuarine Research Reserve. My faculty advisor is Dr. Mark Rains, and my reserve mentor is Ms. Kui Walker. My research focuses on understanding the interactions between hydrologic processes, human activities, and water-dependent ecosystems. I work with resource managers and stakeholders to co-produce tools that can facilitate meaningful conversations and decision-making. I'm super excited to be here today. Thank you all for joining us, and yeah, let's have fun.
Awesome, thanks, Edgar. And last but not least, Marae.
Hey everyone, thank you so much for having me. Again, my name is Marae Lindquist. I'm a PhD candidate at the University of North Carolina, Wilmington. My personal pronouns are she, her, hers. My advisor is Dr. Raymond Danner here at UNCW, and I'm working with the North Carolina National Estuarine Research Reserve. So my research really focuses on the overwinter population biology of salt marsh and seaside sparrows and understanding the impacts of sea level rise on their habitat and populations into the future. And I'm aiming to provide information for management decisions and a framework to understand the impacts of sea level rise on other marsh species as well.
Great, thank you, Marae. All right, I say let's jump into it. So our first prompt question is, what was the sequence of conversations that led to your fellowship application? And I'm going to start with Jessica.
Yeah, so I learned about this program through a peer in my program who sent me the fellowship announcement in July of 2019. And I wanted to mention that because I wanted to say that you should never underestimate that one friend who sends you the saw this, thought you might be interested email, because she was right. So I reviewed the management priorities for all of the reserves and was very excited to see, because of alphabetical order, all the way at the bottom, the Wells Reserve was interested in studying and learning more about the practice of relocation as an adaptation option. So what I did from there is I concurrently shared the opportunity with my academic advisor, who said, this is a great opportunity, you should go for it. And I also reached out directly to Dr. Christine Fort, who is listed as the contact on the management priority. I did that as soon, basically, as I got the announcement, which was in July. So we started those conversations very early. So I then had an initial phone call with Dr. Fort and also with Annie Cox at the Wells Reserves Coastal Training Program to discuss our backgrounds and our research interests, which were very closely aligned. We had a few more phone calls over the next few months to continue the conversation about how my proposal could help to answer their questions. These phone calls also helped us to build a relationship with one another. So I'm trained as a qualitative participatory researcher, and relationships are really critical to the work that I'm doing. Additionally, it's really important that my research responds to community needs, community partner needs. So this was a really interesting opportunity for me to pursue because it kind of met both of those different aspects of doing that type of research. These conversations also really help to lay the foundation for doing collaborative science, which is a core part of the Davidson Fellowship program. So basically my advice is to reach out early and often. And the last point that I would say is one of the other things that I did pretty early on was to start a conversation with the grants administration in my department. I think that I reached out to them around September and applications were due in December. I met with them on basically a weekly basis because there are many different components of the application process and they are experts in submitting these types of proposals. So that's one of my biggest recommendations for folks who are interested in applying.
Awesome, thanks, Jessica. Marae, I saw you nod when Jessica said early and often, so I'd love to hear your thoughts on how your experience might have differed or was similar.
Yeah, it was similar in the way in which I was speaking with the reserve staff and also working with my university early and often. But it's different in the way that I heard about the fellowship. So my department was sent this opportunity, this fellowship opportunity somehow, and then my advisor sent it out to me, letting me know he thought it would be a good opportunity for me to take or apply for. So that's kind of how I got involved and learned about this fellowship in the first place. And then I started meeting with some of the reserve staff and kind of going over, well, they had a meet and greet at my university actually. So all the reserve staff came to UNCW and had a meet and greet with whoever wanted to come and kind of talk about the project, their project ideas and about the fellowship. So I started kind of talking to some people there and then learned that my project might be a good fit for some of the priorities that the reserve had. And so then I had further conversations with some reserve staff. But yes, agree with Jessica on early and often with getting your university sponsored programs because I don't think this is everyone's experience, but for me, I have to have them submit my grant application. So I couldn't submit my grant application myself. So they had to do it for me. So it was really good to be in contact with them early and often.
Yeah, that's a very important point to make about the application process is that you're not alone in that regard. The university is considered the recipient of the grant award, and so they manage the grant. And so, yeah, everyone has to go through their offers for sponsored programs for their university to submit the grant application. Edgar, would love to hear your experience.
Yeah, well, I kind of concur with Jessica and Marae. In the sense that, we have to reach out to our universities early on. The way I heard about the fellowship, though, was a little bit different than both of them. So my faculty advisor, he has been conducting research at the reserve for many years. So I guess in one of the communications that he had with the reserve, he was made aware of this fellowship. And then he kind of forwarded that to me saying, hey, I think this would be a good fit for you. Because, at that time, when the call for proposal was there, I was actually starting to write my own proposal for my dissertation. So it was kind of like a perfect timing. I had that flexibility, a little bit of tailoring my own research so that it fits all the needs of me and the reserve and of the fellowship program. So that was really neat. But we started this process early on. I guess, not as early as Jessica, but we were having the first conversation sometime around end of August. And you know, we went back and forth with my advisor. I had a few communications with the reserve. They had, I guess, you know, the meet and greet was virtual since they are located far from us at least. So that was really nice. There were a few people that joined those calls, and I was made aware of, you know, all their objectives, their goals as a reserve, and yeah, that's how it worked out for me.
Awesome. So it sounds like a couple of you had a meet and greet experience with the reserve. I'm wondering if you can just take a moment to talk about the value that that had in shaping your research project and assessing the fit with those reserve management needs, how that might have helped start those conversations with the reserve staff.
For me, so I had already had 2 field seasons prior to applying for this fellowship, and so I was just lucky that my current project could kind of already fit in some of the priorities. But it would really help talking to them and meeting the folks who work at the reserve to kind of start getting to know them, learn how to collaborate with them, and feel more comfortable reaching out to them when I was ready to talk more about the proposal.
Awesome, thank you. Okay.
Yeah, for me, it was interesting to, you know, I was always interested in performing this collaborative science approach, and that was something that, of course, you know, the reserves in general, you know, the reserve system is very known for, and that was kind of like the link, or I guess the strongest link I found aside from, you know, the science part, but you know, this will of trying to communicate science and make science be something that is developed with the community and not necessarily for the community, if that makes any sense. So, you know, when I learned that, that was kind of like for me that moment where I said, like, I think this is going to work for us.
Nice, and that is a great segue into our second prompt. Thanks for that. So I'd like to go back to Marae for our next prompt. How has your participation in the fellowship program impacted your research? And then what has been the steepest learning curve as well?
Okay, yeah, so this has really helped impact my research in a very positive way. So like I had said, I had 2 field seasons prior to this, but the grant we were working off on that was coming to an end. So it really, really helped me elevate my research spatially and temporally. So with this, I was able to extend my research out for 2 more field seasons, which also helped me get like annual survival for my species that I'm working on, which we wouldn't have been able to do before. And then I also was able to add 3 more sites to my project, which was awesome. So I had 2 before, and now I have 5, so I can really have a lot more temporal aspect of, or spatial aspect of where I'm studying. So I'm going from both eastern to southeastern North Carolina now instead of just southeastern North Carolina. So that's been really nice. I also added a lot of interesting technology that I didn't have access to before because of lack of resources and money. So I was able to purchase a lot more equipment and really have a better way to track my birds throughout their ecosystem. So that has been some of the best parts of this research fellowship, is the resources I have gained and the access to people and communities and government agencies and the NERRS that I've gotten from this project, which is like super awesome. So in regards to the fellowship, I guess the steepest learning curve at the beginning was like trying to figure out the budget. So I have never had to write a budget before, so that was a big thing to learn, and like realizing how much overhead your university takes and like just learning all that was pretty difficult. And then field wise, again, like this was me now kind of leading this project, so learning how to be a leader in the field and be the one who has control and has employees now, because I was able to bring on a few technicians. So that was a really good learning curve. It's steep but good, of like managing people as well.
I like that, steep but good. That's good. That's good to hear. Jessica, I'd like to turn it over to you.
Yeah, so I agree with Marae that this opportunity has really had a very positive impact on my research. And similar, I think we were all shaking our heads as we were saying, we also happened to be at the right point in our academic programs that this fellowship made a lot of sense. So this fellowship, the research that I'm doing and the project that I'm doing is my dissertation research. So that was really nice to be able to do it kind of together. And with that being said, the ability to conduct collaborative applied research as part of a dissertation is, I think, a really unique opportunity, especially in the sense that through this fellowship, we actually do have the potential to inform policy, either at a local, state, regional, or even potentially national level. I think that there are a lot of graduate students that are interested in doing that kind of really applied research, but it can be really tricky to figure out how to do that within the confines of a graduate degree. So this fellowship really opens that door for us. I will also add that my research really centers on community engagement, and through the fellowship, I am both able to and encouraged to work with and learn from reserve staff, community members, elected officials, and I was able to start building connections with those different groups through the existing relationships that the reserve has, which is a huge asset for someone like me coming into a place where I haven't conducted research before, because that kind of networking can really take a lot of time if you're starting from scratch. As far as the learning curve, you know, I think that I think anybody doing a graduate degree right now and in the past, you know, couple of years can say the same thing, but pivoting to a virtual world was really challenging. We submitted these applications in December of 2019. And by the time we got news that we had been awarded these fellowships, the world had completely changed. And so for me, that meant really rethinking the approach to my project, because with a community engaged project, I was really hoping to do interviews and focus groups and workshops. And so thinking about, okay, how am I going to adapt my plan to fit in our current reality? But you know, I would say that luckily that's one of the great things about this program is that there are so many different resources and webinars and trainings available to do things like how do you facilitate online meetings that we have access to that can also help to build our skills to kind of, you know, maybe right now to bridge that that kind of gap between in-person and virtual and hybrid models.
Great. I'd like to just ask one quick follow-up question for you, Jessica, and that is, do you have any tips or lessons learned for future applicants on how to build in a little bit of flexibility to potentially adapt to those kind of external influences? And I'll open that up to Edgar and Marae as well if you have some thoughts on that.
That's a really good question. I don't even know if it's necessarily that you need to reflect it in the proposal itself, or if it's just that you need to enter into the process of the application and writing the proposal, knowing that even outside of a global pandemic, things are going to change once you get on the ground. And so for me, it's almost more of having that mentality of kind of flexibility and adaptability going into the whole process.
Great, that's great advice.
I would like to add to that. I think, you know, I think Jessica is spot on. And I just wanted to add that I think, you know, if I've learned something here through the fellowship is that this flexibility and adaptability is not only something that us as fellows need to learn and, you know, handle, but I've seen it throughout, you know, my fellowship with partners, you know, with the reserve system, with partners from the reserve. Like everybody needs to, and not only because of the global pandemic, but you know, sometimes budget changes or something happens with a piece of equipment that you need to, you know, shift gears or have the flexibility to postpone something without necessarily it affecting your entire time. You know, like, so I guess what I'm trying to say is this flexibility is not only something that is part of our fellowship program, but it's, I guess, part of research and I guess of life, really.
Great, appreciate that. All right, well, I will shift into the third planned prompt that we have, and I'm going to start with Edgar. What else should a prospective fellow know about this program? What might surprise them?
Well, I think we've talked already a little bit about some of the things that for me are key. One of them being, the amount of resources we have to the trainings, workshops, and all that. But with that also comes this, I guess, time commitment outside of our research. So, and I think, from conversations I have had with other fellows, that is something that was new to us. And I know, a lot of the things that that are presented to us, let's put it like that, are not required, but they are such a great opportunity that it's hard to say no, which is really funny because just the other day, I was talking to someone that I really, respected, and he was saying something like, it's super easy to say yes to a good idea, but it's super hard to say no to a good idea. So I think, indirectly, this fellowship has, at least to me, it has taught me in a way, and I'm learning, and I'll keep learning this, to say no to really good ideas so that I can focus on what I'm trying to achieve. So that's the first thing. And then the second thing, actually, that I think that is, to me, it kind of blew my mind, is anytime I reach out to anybody within NOAA, and in my email at the end I have, I'm a Margaret A. Davidson Fellow, like, their reaction and their response and their willingness to help is incredible. Like, it's like this thing that it just opens doors. And I've been invited. I work with the reserve in Alaska, but because of where I go to school, I've been invited to like more regional, Southeast regional meetings and whatnot. And it's just, everybody is very inclusive, and it just opens doors. And I think it allows you to build these relationships that I hope are going to last, beyond the fellowship program.
Love it. I also love the phrasing, learn how to say no to good ideas. If you figure out a good approach for that, please let me know. I struggle with that as well. Marae, I'd love to turn it over to you to get your thoughts.
I 1000% agree with Edgar on this one. There are so many great opportunities, but it's so hard to take them all. I also have a really hard time saying no to things. So sometimes you just have to, like, there was a networking challenge in May that like I wanted to do, but I just didn't have it within my bandwidth to do it. But it was so nice that the opportunity was presented to us that we could do if we wanted. So yeah, there's a bit of a time commitment that you kind of have to learn to be flexible with, whether it's some of the opportunities that we are mandatory or even opportunities that we can take if we want, and just like figuring out what you should say yes to and what is best for you and for your future and your career choices. So yeah, everyone is so nice. Working with the NERRS opened so many opportunities just in North Carolina in general, and then also with all the other reserve staff. It's so nice to get to know everyone. Like Edgar was saying, everyone's super friendly and helpful, and everyone wants to help you, which is really nice. So yeah, it's been a great opportunity, and I've gotten to know so many people, and it's really, really elevated my research.
Thanks. Yeah, I haven't been with the reserve system for that much longer than you all, and it's definitely one of the most supportive and welcoming communities that I've been fortunate to be a part of. So that's been great. Jessica, I'd love to hear your final thoughts on this.
Yeah, I'm probably going to sound a little bit like a broken record, but the fellowship has a really strong focus on professional development. So this is not just a fellowship that's going to support your research. It's really much more well-rounded than that. So there are many opportunities to gain skills and knowledge outside of, just doing your research out in the field. We have had trainings on science communication, collaborative science, logic models, professional branding. The nature of having the fellowship in and of itself also gives you the opportunity to learn about project management. So as Edgar and Marae have kind of said, there is a bit of a balance of figuring out some challenges in terms of scheduling and time commitment, but overall you really are gaining such a tremendous amount of opportunities and skills that you will come away, I think, really looking like a better candidate for the job market, because you'll be very well-rounded. I would say that one of the things that I did not know about was the size and scope of the NERRS network. So this fellowship was actually the first time I had ever heard of the National Estuarine Research Reserve System, which I was kind of surprised about because I thought I was fairly well versed on federal organizations. But there is so much important and innovative work happening at each of the reserves and throughout the whole system. So that's just really exciting that you have so many opportunities to tap into that network. And then, like others have said, it really feels like you are part of a family. So, unfortunately, we couldn't meet in person for the annual meeting, but even virtually, you could really tell that everyone who works in the NERRS system loves the work that they do. They love where they work and they love the people that they work with. And there's also a lot of enthusiasm for the fellows and our projects. And I would say that we've really been welcomed with wide open arms. So it's really a great family to join.
Awesome.
I would love to add a little something to that, if that's okay.
Yeah, of course.
One of the really awesome things also is that we have a great cohort of other fellows, and that has been so awesome. And so we do stuff with the reserve, but also we do stuff outside of stuff that reserve plans for us, or that the NERRS or NOAA plans for us. So some people have organized lightning talks, and we have discussions. And so there's stuff outside that other fellows plan. And it's really nice because we can get together and we have chats and just get to know each other more and help each other with our research, and just feel like we're all in this together.
Yeah, that's a great addition. Great to hear. Sometimes that peer-to-peer learning and support system makes a huge difference. Thank you all for responding and providing great insights and tips for those planned prompts. We have a list of questions over here, so would love to address some of those. The first being, and I'm gonna see if any of you have a response to this one, but I'm happy to take a portion of it as well. First question is, all of the panelists seem to be PhD candidates. Do master's students ever successfully apply? I'm wondering how the timing works for shorter graduate programs. So I'm wondering if any of you have heard from your peers on this topic.
There are some, I mean, you obviously know better than us, Chris, but I know there are some people doing master's programs that seem to be enjoying the fellowship just as much as a PhD candidate or student would.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what the exact numbers are, but it seems like a decent amount of the cohort is pursuing their masters. And it is a 2-year fellowship, so I think that, I'm not positive, but I think that it's possible that some of those students applied for the fellowship before they started their programs, and used it as an opportunity to actually fund their studies. But I mean, just personally hearing about the research that everyone is doing, I wouldn't be able to tell you who is a master's or a PhD student. I think everybody is doing exceptionally high quality research.
Yeah, so to answer the question, the split is about 1/3 have a master's or pursuing a master's degree, and 2/3 are PhD candidates. And the timing is definitely trickier for master's students. We address some of those in our frequently asked questions document that we have on the website in terms of thinking about timing as it relates to your degree programs. And so it definitely a little more challenging with masters. It tends to be a little better suited for a 3 years master program, but the kind of general requirements are that you are within your degree, you're within the fellowship program for a full year, and then most of your second year are kind of the general requirements for the fellowship program on that one. Great question, thank you. And yes, like I said, on our website, we have a frequently asked questions document that answers a lot of those timing and eligibility kind of questions. Next one, when choosing a reserve, How much does proximity to your university matter? If the NER that most closely supports your research is far from your university, will this pose a problem? I'm going to direct this one to Edgar.
I would say it doesn't matter at all. I mean, I'm going to school in Florida, and my reserve is in Alaska. And I think, if we can look at, a try and silver lining last year, nowadays with all the virtual stuff we have, it really, I don't think it matters. I know that the fellowship has a requirement for us to be on site a minimum amount of time, which I think is great. I mean, I'm just, I haven't had the opportunity really to go up there because of what's happened, but I already have my travel plans in line for my field season, and I'm excited, and everybody up there is excited to meet me in person. So I would say it doesn't matter. Just I think what matters the most is to make sure that your research, I guess, interests match those from the reserve.
Jessica, I'd love to give you an opportunity if you wanted to add a little bit about your experience, because you are similar-ish, but have taken a different approach.
Yeah, and I was actually hoping to maybe touch on this because, it could be an option for some folks. So I'm doing my degree at Michigan State University, but my research really focuses on people's attachment to place and sense of place and how that informs their decision making. And again, kind of getting back to being a participatory researcher, it was really important for me to think about, could I actually move to this place? Because I want to be able to inform my own sense of place, and I really want to be able to build those relationships with people on the ground. So luckily, because I was done with coursework for my graduate program, I actually wrote into my proposal that I would relocate to Maine, and was able to do that. And I will say that, if I do think that there is some benefit to being able to be at your reserve on a semi-regular basis. I actually am able to go in, 2 to 3 days a week to work there. And for certain types of research that might not really matter that much, and as long as you do get a field season, that's fine. But for me, it was really important to actually be there and to build relationships. And I would argue that I think that my mentor thinks that has been a real benefit for the reserve as well.
Great, thank you for sharing that experience. Definitely two different approaches to that, but it kind of depends on the level of engagement that's required, as well as just the general capacity for that. Awesome. Next question. Was it essential to build a strong relationship with the reserve you are interested in working with? A kind of subset of that is this person applied in 2019 and did reach out to the reserve staff. They were very responsive and willing to speak with me, but they seemed to purposely keep somewhat distant.
Yeah, so I think that they have to keep kind of a distance because they can't be influencing your project. So like they can't be kind of talking to you too much so they like have a vested interest in you per se. So you can have conversations with your reserve and make sure you're kind of in line with what their priorities are, but they can't be giving you too much advice and reading through your proposal and stuff before, because that might influence their decision on who they would pick.
Yeah, I wonder if it would be helpful for people listening, Chris, if you could maybe like provide a little bit of information on the review process, because there is a kind of a blind review process that our proposals go through.
Yep, I agree. I think that would be helpful. So there are 2 stages of the review. The first is a general merit review. So it kind of falls within the typical NOAA criteria, technical and scientific merit. Does it fit within the priorities? Is the applicant qualified? Those kind of things. And then there's a panel that is conducted at the reserve level to assess the fit with the management priorities. Do the reserves have the resources to support the research kind of thing? And so those kind of topics we encourage within the funding announcement to have those conversations with the reserve to talk about, does your project fit within the general scope for the management priorities, as well as does the reserve have the resources to support the application. And so yes, Marae, as you were saying, there's some guidance because this is a competitive grant application process. There are certain levels of feedback that reserves can provide without creating a conflict of interest. And so they definitely reach out to your reserve staff, have those conversations. It just don't be turned away if they can't review or say they can't review a written version of your proposal. The conversations are really to help guide you in your application to make sure that it's a good fit with the management priorities and addresses the needs without getting into the, yes, this is a well-written proposal kind of thing.
Hey, Chris, I actually was going to mention that because during the process of my application, I did reach out to the reserve, and at some point, and because I had kind of a little bit of a knowledge of how that worked, I asked them like, hey, I'm like, this is one of the chapters that I'm trying to put in my proposal. Would you be willing to look at it? And they told me, we prefer if you don't send anything like that to us. We can talk about the general idea, but we don't really want to get into providing that level of feedback. So I think, as Marae and you all said, that's kind of like the protocol.
And part of that is that you don't want to have someone who's reviewing a proposal, then serving on a panel making those decisions. So it's to make the process as equitable as we possibly can, and because it is a competitive process. So hopefully that answers those questions. Okay, so here's another one. As a current and or past fellow, what things you would like to know before being a fellow that would make your path easier given the challenges that come along the way? Example, saying no to good ideas. So basically, what advice would you give prospective fellows to make the path a little easier now that you have experienced being the first class in this fellowship program, this new and exciting program?
I think, for me, and what's been super helpful is to reach out as much as you can to, people, like you, Chris, or, Melissa, people that work with the NERRS system and with the reserve. And as we mentioned before, everybody's really willing to guide you and to help you. And I think if you keep those channels of communication open, to me, that's been super helpful.
Communication is key, they say. All right. Another question here. When in your PhD did you apply for the fellowship? Did you just start out, or were you midway already?
I was in my third year. So I was right on I was preparing for my comprehensive exams as I was writing the proposal, which actually worked out really well for me because writing the proposal was good practice for my comprehensive exams.
I wrote it in my second year, and so I have the fellowship my third and fourth years of my PhD.
I was a year and a half in, but I had taken some classes before starting the program. So I think like timeline-wise, there was more kind of like Jessica's timeline, where my first semester of the fellowship was really that semester where I had my qualifying exams. So as I was writing my proposal, I was in the fellowship, so that was pretty helpful.
Great, thank you. So there's a follow-up question. Could students starting their PhD apply for this fellowship? A simple answer is yes.
So I would, I know that there are, I don't know how many people, but I know that there's at least, a handful of people who did it that way right at the beginning. And I would maybe offer just a slight, not word of caution, but just to be aware, as we were saying, that this is not just research. It is a lot of professional development. So that might be something that you want to take into consideration, is that you are going to be balancing a lot in your first year as a PhD student with coursework and research and professional development all happening at once.
That's great advice. So the simple answer in terms of eligibility to apply is yes, but definitely great advice to keep in mind.
Can I add to that real quick?
Of course.
So Jessica's right. So I actually had a conversation with one of our fellow, from our cohort that applied for this fellowship as she was starting her PhD. And I mean, she kind of said what Jessica said. She felt terrible that she couldn't take advantage of all these opportunities that, are there because, she had coursework or lab work or just all her PhD stuff that you have to do at the very beginning. So maybe if you really want to take advantage of all that is offered, I think maybe it would be best to have it a little bit later within your program.
I feel like I've been the same or even more busy throughout as my PhD moves along. So like I feel like slightly the opposite. I maybe had more time at the beginning than I do now because the way my research is structured, I can only take classes one semester out of the year. So I'm always stacked. So I have classes, then research class. So I haven't had a break. So for me, any time would have been fine for this. But the way for funding, it worked out that I had it for my second or third and fourth years.
Great, thank you. So kind of a related question to that, do you have any advice for applying to this fellowship while simultaneously applying to the university's graduate program? What if you have no prior field season experience or research that could directly translate? So any advice for someone who might just be getting started?
Maybe work a lot with an advisor that you're interested in working with. So kind of find someone who you would like to work with and kind of see what their priorities as research might be, how they can really help you along. Having a good advisor is key to having a successful master's or PhD in my experience.
Anything, Jessica or Edgar, you'd like to add to that? Or I see you nodding, so definitely in agreement.
Well, I'm just wondering too, like maybe, Edgar had mentioned that his advisor had previous experience working with the NERR up in Alaska. So that could be also another pathway for kind of identifying people to start talking with is, if there's a reserve or some reserves that you're interested in, seeing, which schools they're connected with or what kind of faculty they're working with.
Or asking them if they have data sets they want to get through or something that they haven't been able to get through, if they would like a fellow or someone to do it as a project.
Yeah, I was gonna say, maybe if you're at that point in your timeline, just look at what type of research is happening at the reserve that you're interested in, and then maybe start your conversation with the reserve. They can point you to researchers that are associated with them, and then kind of follow that lead. So that may be another option. And then if by doing it that way, you also kind of know that your interests are aligning with reserve goals and objectives. So, you have, I guess, a step into the application process already.
Great advice, thank you. Another question here, are projects that involve multiple reserves likely to be more successful, or are projects that involve a single reserve just as likely to be funded?
I think that's a really good question. I don't know if there's an answer to that, but I will say that I don't have an answer to that, but in being part of this initial cohort, I know we've said the word opportunity like 1,000 times during this webinar, but there seem to be endless opportunities for collaborating with people at other reserves. So like I'm based in Wells, but or in Maine, but some of the methods that I'm using or the ways that I'm thinking about research questions are of interest to the other reserves that are in New England, as well as, in other areas around the country. And, in some ways, I think that that's really fostered for us. Like they want that to happen. So I think if there is a way that you could spin your proposal to say, like, yes, I will be working with this reserve to answer their management question, but I know that these other reserves are also working on this, and I would, be excited to collaborate with them.
I would like to chime in here because I'm in a slightly interesting situation because I'm in the North Carolina Reserve. And so instead of being one single site, there are multiple locations within the North Carolina NERR. So there are multiple different islands and stuff that they manage and own. And so I think it bolstered my application to have multiple of those sites within North Carolina in my proposal instead of just focusing on, say, one location that they own. So it is still one reserve, but we have multiple locations in which I could write my proposal for.
Edgar, I wasn't sure if there was anything that you wanted to add onto that, or if you're.
Yeah, it was more of like as Jessica and Marae were talking about it, I was thinking, this question came to mind. I don't know if the way the fellowship, the call for proposals is set up, gives you that ability to, because at that point you would almost have to apply to two reserves, the way I understand the fellowship, the call for proposals. So I am not saying it's not possible. It's just maybe a lot more work because at that point you have to have two applications for two different sites, if I read that correctly. But,
Yeah, so applicants cannot submit the same proposal and include multiple reserves. They have to submit two separate proposals if they're considering two different reserves. I don't have the review criteria in front of me right now, so I don't recall if there's a component around collaborating with multiple reserves. But to answer the question, submitting a proposal to work at a single reserve does not put you at a disadvantage in terms of the review criteria for your project. And so projects that are working at a single reserve are reviewed at the same level as projects that have some sort of collaborative component across multiple reserves. That being said, I know the Southeast programs have a kind of collaborative management need that can be addressed through a research project, but there's still a single host reserve that you would be applying to. So there are some opportunities out there, but don't feel like because your project doesn't involve working at multiple reserves or collaborating across multiple reserves that you are at a disadvantage. It's all about addressing the management need for those reserves.
Can I just add something to this that might be a little tangential, but I would also encourage applicants not just to think about the potential to influence the work that's being done at the reserve or the work that's being done in the reserve system. One of the really core foci of this program is on making sure that the work that we're doing can be used by stakeholders. So that's another really important way to think about, bolstering your application and having a bigger impact, is really thinking about, okay, I'm doing this work with the reserves and with the reserve system, but who are the end users for this, and how am I going to work with them and learn from them, and make sure that they're incorporated throughout the project.
Great addition. Thank you, Jessica. So we have time for one more question, and I'm going to end on this question. You all mentioned the established partnerships at reserves as being a valuable place-based platform for research and engagement. What skills have you learned or experiences have you had that improve your relationship with end users and help you move from extractive to more reciprocal research practices? Kind of a long question, so I can repeat if you would like. So it's all about getting that reciprocal kind of engagement and relationship with end users.
So I, probably not surprisingly, love this question. One of the ways that I have been doing that is really to actually see kind of my end users, or the community, as people that I am co-learning with. So I am really actually looking to, for example, coastal homeowners, property owners, as kind of a way to learn about the changes that have been happening in the community. So I am actually directly going to them to say, what are the observations that you have had over time? What are the experiences that you've had over time? And in doing so, I'm just building more of a collaborative learning relationship with the community. So rather than coming in and being extractive, or coming in and saying, I'm the expert, let me tell you all about how you should adapt to sea level rise, I'm going into it with a much more kind of curious mind to say, what have you been experiencing? What do you think would work best for your community? And how can I kind of help you to move forward towards those aspirations?
Great.
I agree with Jessica. I just, just to add to that, like for me, I'm not a social scientist, so having the ability to learn through the fellowship, this ability to learn how this collaborative science approach works, and seeing it actually in play every single time I'm with the reserve staff and we're engaging with stakeholders or partners or whatnot. It's just I've been exposed to that and seen it firsthand, if you will. So now in my research, that's what I'm trying to do. I'm going to people and asking them what they think is happening, so that I can take that knowledge and information and put it into the model I'm developing, so that the model that I develop is something that came from them, that is meaningful to them, and is something that they can ultimately, hopefully, feel part of. And it's not something that just someone from Florida came and said, look, this is what I think you should be doing. It's something that we all did together. So I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah, part of what I've enjoyed too is like getting to know other people. So like this fellowship has given me the opportunity to like meet some of my end users and be more collaborative with them, and then also just create some offshoot projects. Like getting to know them has led to more collaborative projects outside of my PhD that, no wonder why I'm so busy. I'm just doing other projects just for fun. But it led to more collaboration and more projects with other folks that are my end users on this project right now.
Great. Yeah, I also, Jessica, love that question. How do you know what will be useful to someone without asking them, right? So we are in the final couple minutes of the webinar. I want to send a huge thank you to you all for taking the time to provide responses and answering these questions. Hopefully those who attended the webinar learned a little bit more about the program, as well as your projects, and as well as getting some good tips for those who are potential applicants on applying to this next round. So just want to say thank you. Huge thank you. So just a couple final comments. If you are a potential applicant or know of someone who might be interested, visit our website. We have a lot of useful resources, the frequently asked questions document to determine eligibility and answer a lot of your questions about the application process. And if you have a reserve in mind, on our website, we have the reserve management need document, which lists points of contact for the different management needs as well. And so feel free to reach out to the reserve that you're interested in to start those conversations. And then finally, I invite the panelists to share links to your LinkedIn profiles or whatever social media platform you use, in case anyone in the audience would like to connect with you further about your experience or follow the progress on your research project. And with that, I will turn it back over to Nick to close us out. And thank you all again.
And thank you, Chris. Just a few other notes as we're wrapping up here. I'll move on to the next slide. We have a webinar next month on designing science for coastal and ocean decision making that is co-hosted with Restore, and we are taking a break in August, but you can stay tuned for more updates. You can subscribe to our mailing list. The link for that will go through the exit survey, which you'll receive tomorrow in a follow-up email, and that link will also have that email will also have a link to the wrap-up that has the session recording for this webinar. And hopefully we'll try to get some Q&A questions answered as well. It might not be tomorrow, but hopefully in the next few days we can get some of those questions answered if you didn't see your question answered. If you want to reach out to any of the panelists, you can do it that way as well. If you don't see an obvious way to contact them, there's a little space for additional comments and suggestions, so you can feel free to say, hey, I'd like to talk to this panelist about X, and put that in the comments in the exit survey. And there are some questions in the exit survey about the program as well. So if you take a few minutes, we really appreciate it. It really helps us out. And on that note, I will end with just a big, echoing Chris and saying a big thank you to the panelists for answering all of our questions and being such engaging and thoughtful discussants. So thank you for that. Thank you to Chris for moderating, and you did an excellent job, Chris, I will say. And thank you to everybody who joined us today. So we know that in the world of virtual everything, this kind of thing can get exhausting. So we appreciate you taking the time to be with us today. And with that, everyone, enjoy the rest of your day.